Sorry about the zoom in and out, but I don't know where he's going to come up next. So over here just tearing up the fish in this little cove. And there he goes. I don't know what it is. These guys know. I think, like, they know what a camera is. I think they're that smart. Because I could have a dolphin come hang out with me all day, and the minute I pull out a camera, they want to run away. Anyway, this is Bird Island. There's a little shack that got washed up on shore. There's blue barrels under it, so it did float at one time. Wasn't exactly built really sturdy, but okay. You see, this is kind of a little sandbar where people pull up, hang out on their boats. Fog's, it's just afternoon, and the fog's just now starting to clear. So I didn't set out to travel today because you couldn't see across this channel to those trees. You couldn't see from here until just, I don't know, 20 minutes ago. And there's big cruisers. So I'm in the channel cruising long distance, and I got a long way between me and anything. And if you go out of the channel, it might be only a shallow 2 or 3, 1 foot. It might be less. You might hit bottom even in this little thing, just going a few feet out of the channel. So I really like to be able to see a big cruiser or something throwing a big wake. I like to be able to see it, when it's a couple miles off, at least. And gives me time to check the charts for a deep spot well away from the channel that's not too far out of my way. Doesn't have obstructions between me and it, and gun it toward that spot. And if I can get behind an island or a sandbar that will break his wake from hitting me, then I can get in position long before he ever gets there. And hopefully be far enough away from the channel when he passes by where, his wake will kind of subside before it gets to me. If I can't get out of its path, at least I can get less of it. So that's kind of my strategy for the long distance, surviving the big boats that don't care if they swamp you, even though it's illegal. A lot of them, not only do they not care, but they don't know. Like, they think just because the sign says resume normal safe operation, it's that safe, the word safe, that they miss. All they see is resume normal operation, or 30 miles per hour, or whatever. Can't stress this enough. And you see a small kayak or canoe or something, and it's got 4 to 6 inches between the water and the edges of the top rail. You shouldn't be throwing a 10-foot wake at them, because you are liable for your wake and any damage it might do to anybody or their things, regardless of what the speed limit might be, or even if there is no speed limit. Even if you're in the middle of the ocean, you're still responsible for your wake. It's just, that's one of those laws where it's hard to enforce it, because the person rarely has a camera out when somebody flips their boat with their wake. Anyway, between here and that island over there is the shallows. Right in that area, before that sign, there's an area that's really shallow over there, and it's called Spoonbill Shoals, and that is Bird Sanctuary Island. This is Bird Island, and that is a bird sanctuary. It doesn't say Bird Sanctuary Island because it doesn't even have a name as far as I can tell. But it's a bird sanctuary, and there's signs all the way around it. And I'm sure if you got close enough to it, those signs would say, "Stay off. Don't touch this land. It's off limits." Because now I'm trying it. That's as far in as I can zoom, and you see there's two little pink birds over there. I'd have to get much closer to see if they're. Well, I could use my telescope, but let's just see if they're spoonbills or flamingos. They look very similar at this distance. But anyway, that's where I'm at. It's Monday afternoon, early afternoon. I just found out yesterday that these jellyfish, see if I can get that on camera. It doesn't really show up on camera. It's a little iridescent. They're clear jellyfish, but sometimes the sun reflects on them just right to where you see this little iridescence. And they're in here by the millions all day, especially up in that cut in there where you go into town. Once you go around these islands, these shoals, you go up in between that island and that shore, and there's a channel that goes in there under a bridge. There's a marina and some kayak rentals and whatnot. That's where I went to get water this morning. But anyhow, here comes a little pontoon boat. Should be alright. The tide's, I think, fairly high at the moment. But that's pretty shallow going through there. Nope, I think he just hit bottom. Yeah, he's backing up. Anyway, that's enough of that. It is February 3rd. My sister's birthday. Shout out to my sister Tammy. And whenever I say I spent X amount of this or that on this or that for building this boat, what I mean is Tammy funded it and took care of me while I was there building it so that this could happen. So it's really, we spent the money on this. I mean, I guess, you know, be doing some chores around her place to help offset the cost of it all, but honestly, this is possible because of her funding and her men also contributed quite a bit, and my nephews, you know, a couple of them gave me a hand once or twice. A little bit. But anyway, here we are. Thank you to you, Tammy, and happy birthday. And maybe someday I can find a way to make this all worth it for you. If I can see all the way across now. Oh, don't know. I'm gonna have to check the charts and see how far it is to the next safe haven and whether or not it's worth burning a few hours this afternoon traveling. I think I might go anchor up on an island in the middle of nowhere this evening, just so I can get a little further south. Missed the whole morning with that heavy fog, and that's okay. You can't be in a hurry when you're traveling in a little vessel like this. You can't plan your days based on, it takes a day to travel X amount of miles with this type of tide. You think you got it all figured out. You go, okay, and there's X amount of miles between here and where we're going, so let's say that we should be there in 4 days, 5 days. No, you should be there. That means you can get there with 5 days of full day travel, is what that means. And it's not that often where you get an entire 5 days a week of full travel, or you might get a week or two or even 3 in a row with good weather. But there's also times when the wind is really strong and it's too rough out in the open. So you got to look at, are you in a narrow area where there's a lot of wind blockage between you and the wind? You got to look at which way is the wind going, because if you're in a straight channel that goes north and south and the wind's coming from the north, then the waves are going to get big before they hit you. Or if it's coming from the south and it's strong, but coming from the east or west, maybe not so much. You don't really have as much time to build up before the wind is hitting the trees on the other side. So, you want to look at things like that. You got to look at weather and rain, all that, and you're like, well, how many calm wind or wind going our direction, not against us, how many days of that? If you're sailing, then you definitely want wind in your direction. If you're paddling, you want currents and tides in your direction. And you got to look at that. Well, chances are, if you're not motoring, maybe you're paddle sailing like I did last time, then you're going to be at the mercy of the tides and wind. And just cruising along against those is not going to be an option for you. So you got to look at, generally that means you only get a half day of travel if you're taking the tide. Say there is no wind and you're just riding the tides and paddling. Well, you're not going to get anywhere in this kind of rig paddling, or even the other one paddling. If the current's against you, you won't get anywhere. It's just not even worth the time. You might spend 4 hours and get a quarter mile, half a mile, maybe a mile. And then you look at it and you're like, well, all I did was succeeded in getting so far out of town. I'm too far away from any resources, where now I'm in kind of an emergency because I'm running out of resources and it's way too far to get where I'm going, and now we got like several days of rain. So if you're in a spot where you're close enough where you can have access to shore and you can get to that grocery store or that whatever you need, and you don't have a big enough weather window for sure in the right conditions to get where you're going with the vessel you have, and some of that may even also got to consider, like, you may not be able to travel on the weekends at all in certain areas because it's just too dangerous with all the foolishness with other people in really big boats just don't care, or they think it's funny if they think it's like, oh, let's try to swamp them. They don't realize. realize they can actually go to jail for it, or somebody could die. you know, they think it's just a fun and games until somebody gets hurt, and yeah, many times they just keep going, like they don't even pretend like they didn't even know it happened to you. You're on your own, so it's really to the point where if that area is not patrolled enough, people, like, they just don't care. Or even the cops don't necessarily enforce that wake law where, you know, okay, if it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone and you have to go past that zone to get where you're going, and there's a lot of big boats going fast all weekend long. It's just better to wait till Monday. You might or might not make it through, but your phone's probably going to be dead because it got salted with salt water, you know, or whatever. Maybe your charging system gets salted, or your whole dang system sinks. You know, it's just, sometimes it's just not worth it, even though the weather's perfect. Conditions might be the best you've had in a long time, but it's Saturday. You know, and you're just in one of those areas where there's just no way to get away from those big boats, because it's like seawall to seawall in a narrow stretch for a long way, with no little coves or little cuts where you can turn out and get away from it. Yeah, it's not safe to go through that on a weekend when the weather's nice and people are being stupid, discourteous. So there's things that people might not consider if they don't have a lot of experience traveling distance in vessels like this. And yet you can get quite a bit of distance and totally safely, but you have to be smart about it. You can't expect to be there, like set yourself a date and be like, okay, I'm gonna be there before this date, come hell or high water, you know. Unless you have like the kind of boat that can be swamped like a submarine and still won't sink, and everything's waterproof and nothing can be hurt by salt water, and you don't care about how wet you get, and the boat can handle whatever, getting slammed by whatever size waves. You know, you got one of those boats that you can lift it up in the air with a crane and drop it from 10 feet and it won't hurt it. Okay, then have at it. Go ahead and head out haphazardly. But I don't have that setup coming